I just found out my ex-boyfriend Roman bugged my phone case. What's going on? Was he spying on me or trying to protect me? I need to tell Tristan, but what if Roman just wanted to keep me safe? Thank you for your likes and subscriptions. You can leave your comments in the comments section. 𝐊𝐲, you look like a princess. Hazel gasped. I ran my hand down the fabric of my dress, smoothing it over before taking in a deep breath. You think so? I asked. She nodded as she came around the dress, lifting the skirt. So flowy. I smiled. Aunt Sarah was a miracle worker. Kat and I had gone from store to store for days looking for the perfect dress. But nothing we found was good enough. And if they were way above my budget. Roman had offered to pay, but I had firmly refused him. I knew that he usually saved the money he got from working for Uncle Victor because his foster parents hardly gave him a penny. And he was still a few weeks away from getting his AAP allowance. I wasn't at all comfortable with taking money from Roman. Kat and I had pretty much given up when Aunt Sarah came to the rescue. She had a seamstress friend, Miss Rachel, who had been making bridesmaid dresses. One of the dresses had been left behind because apparently one of the bridesmaids had been hooking up with the bride's father, and I don't even want to go into that. My point is, a perfectly good dress had been left behind. And it was gorgeous. With Kat and Aunt Sarah's suggestions, we had it modified to suit me better. After lowering the neckline a bit, tightening the waist, adding delicate flowers to the skirt, I had a light blue and white sleeveless dress that I absolutely loved. Aunt Sarah had half-braided my hair to the side, leaving the curly ends undone. She had asked Miss Rachel for some of the flowers she had used for the dress and had attached them to plain hairpins which she put into my hair. It all went with the dress perfectly. I loved it. I felt like a sort of fairy princess. Kat appeared at the door with a smirk on her face. She leaned against the door. Hey Cinderella, your prince is here. Roman was here. I hadn't even heard the door. I sucked in a deep breath. Do I look all right? Kat sighed and placed her hands on my shoulders. Oh dear grasshopper, when will you learn that you are woman and you are perfect? She smiled. You look amazing, Crystal. I should know. Kat had done my makeup and it had come out perfectly. All those makeup tutorials she had spent years watching were definitely paying off. Now come on. You're already late. I picked up my purse and my phone. I checked the time, it was 8:30 and we were supposed to be there by 8. I hadn't even noticed. Walk me downstairs, I asked, outstretching my hand to Hazel. She jumped off the bed in excitement and took my hand. Remember not to do anything I wouldn't. Kat told me. I honestly wished she was coming with me. There was an age restriction for the ball, but I was an exception because I was Roman's date. Roman had initially wanted to invite Aunt Sarah and Uncle Victor in place of his parents, but of course Millie and Sal chose to act like actual guardians for once in their lives. When I got downstairs, I heard Uncle Victor and Roman's voices. I walked into the living room. Parker was sit on Roman's lap messing around with his cell phone, while Roman was deep into a conversation with Uncle Victor about some football game. Men. Kat scoffed. She cleared her throat loudly, grabbing their attention. They both stopped to look at me. Roman set Parker down and stood up. He stared at me, his eyes roaming my dress. Wow. He breathed out. 𝐏𝐼𝐳. I spoke shyly. 𝐏𝐻𝐻. His eyes wandered to my body. You look amazing, Crystal. I felt my face heat up. Not as good as you. He brushed a hand down his tuxedo jacket. It was an expensive-looking deep blue one which brought out his stormy gray eyes even more. Well, you know, when you're good, you're good. I rolled my eyes but smiled. We should get going, right? I spoke. Wait. We need a picture. Aunt Sarah exclaimed, rushing in from the kitchen with a camera in her hands. Mom, you're embarrassing them. Kat spoke. Oh, come on, you two will want to remember this night. Aunt Sarah argued. Roman smiled at me. She's right. He walked towards me and wrapped his arms around me from behind. I felt all warm and giddy inside. Aunt Sarah took the picture and Roman dropped his arms and I found myself wishing he hadn't. Well, we really should be going, Roman spoke. I'm supposed to be lined up with the other candidates by 9. Well, okay, son. Be safe and take care of our baby girl. Uncle Victor instructed. He smiled at Roman. I'm proud of you, son. We're proud of you. Aunt Sarah nudged Uncle Victor. Roman smiled. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Benson, that means a lot coming from both of you. Don't mention it, son. Get on your way. drive safely and remember curfew is not a minute after 12. Roman and I spoke simultaneously. Uncle Victor narrowed his eyes at us. Do not sass me. I'll see you guys later. I called as I took Roman's hand and led him out of the house. The night was cooler than I had been anticipating. Roman and I walked to his truck, and he opened the passenger door for me. He was unusually quiet, and I realized that there was still some tension between us since our study date in the park. Radio? He asked. Sure. I nodded. He turned on some soft rock song that I didn't recognize. I didn't want things to be so awkward between us on such an important day for him. I wanted him to be happy, and I wanted to share in his happiness. How come you're late? I asked, figuring that was safe enough to break the ice. Roman was an extremely punctual person. I got into an argument with Sal. He explained. I frowned. Why would he make Roman angry on this day of all days? What was the argument about? Roman clenched his hands around the steering wheel. They wanted us to drive up to the party together like some big fake happy family. He scoffed. They didn't treat Roman like their son, and now because he had accomplished something this amazing, they wanted to share in it. Roman had a right to be mad. I'm sorry, I told Roman, rubbing his shoulder. He sucked in a deep breath to calm himself down. It's not your fault. The car took a turn and I realized that we were already in the town square. The town hall where the ball was taking place was lit up, and I could already hear the soft music. Roman drove up to the entrance. A valet took his keys as we got out of the truck. Judging by the lack of people outside, I could tell that we really were late. Roman held his hand out for me. I took it and let him lead me up the steps. When we got to the middle of the grand steps, he stopped. He turned and looked at me. Listen, I'm sorry for going off on you the other day. He spoke suddenly. I really hadn't been expecting such a random apology, but I was grateful that we were getting it out of the way. It's okay, I shouldn't have pried. I told him. Roman tapped his fingers on his pants and I could tell he was anxious. I just don't like talking about it, my past, He spoke. It's okay, Ro. No, I think you need to hear this. He looked right into my eyes. Crystal, you're the best thing that has ever happened to me. He took my hand in his. And my past, it's messy. They are just some things. He sucked in a deep breath. I love you, Crystal. He spoke with a certain desperate tone in his voice. Like he needed me to hear this. This might just be a high school romance thing for you, but I have never had anything or anyone to call my own until I met you. Heck, you could dump me right now and you would still be the best thing that ever happened to me. He chuckled weakly. Ro, I would never. I don't need to hear you say it back, Crystal. I honestly don't. But I love you. And I know I don't deserve your love because you were right. I'm broken. I ran my fingers over his cheek. You're not broken, Roman. Don't ever say that. And you do deserve love. Everyone deserves love. He looked up at me and forced a smile. I didn't plan on being a total cheeseball. Nothing lasts forever. Especially for me. Nothing has ever lasted long in my life. You told me that sometimes you feel like I'll disappear, and I'm sorry about that. It's just that I'm not used to being kept around for too long. I knew what he meant. When Roman was brought to Woodfell, it wasn't too different than when he lived with humans, being bounced around from home to home. At least here he had settled with Sal and Millie. They weren't the warmest towards him, but at least they weren't as abusive as the others had been. At least not physically. In case you didn't notice, Ro. I told him, wrapping my arms around his neck and pulling him close so that our foreheads touched. I'm crazy about you. I don't plan on going anywhere. It confused me how Roman still didn't see how much I was obsessed with him. My fascination towards him hadn't diminished one bit since I had met him. And honestly, it frightened me how much this boy had a hold on my heart. His face dropped slightly. He tried to cover it with another smile, but I could see the strain behind it. My life is more complicated than you would think, Crystal. I wouldn't want to drag you into all of it. I rolled my eyes. I can handle whatever baggage you come with. I have my own baggage too, you know? Like your complete apathy towards physical education. He chuckled. P. E is evil, and if you were normal you would know that too. I told him with seriously. Now will you please kiss me already? I whined. With the position we were in, I had been hoping that he would get the hint. The moon looked like a toenail. We were standing on the steps of the grand hall of the town square. The night was beautiful and this handsome boy's lips weren't on mine. Instead of complying, Roman pulled away and took a step back to my reluctance. I frowned at him. First, I wanted to give you something. Roman dug into his pocket and pulled out a rectangular black box. You didn't let me get you your dress, so I got you something else. I gave him a small smile. You really didn't have to, Ro. He shrugged. I wanted to. He opened the box and I saw a silver glittery phone case with the initials C.S. on it. I had honestly been expecting a necklace or a bracelet or something more conventional, I guess. I took it out of the box and giggled. This is different. Roman put his hands in his pocket and shrugged. I know. I wanted to get you a necklace, but you already have that one that your mother gave you, and you already promised her you wouldn't take it off. I just wanted to give you something that's special as well. Something you would take with you everywhere you go. Almost like you have a piece of you with me. He chuckled. Do you like it? I had to admit it wasn't the gift I was expecting, but it was a gift from Roman, so I didn't mind. And I did pretty much carry my phone everywhere. I love it. I told him as I immediately dug into my purse and switched out the covers with my old plain purple one. Roman beamed at me. His excitement at something so small amused me. Now do I get my kiss? I asked. He laughed. Someone can't control themselves tonight. I shrugged. What can I say? Balls do these things to me. Roman smiled before moving closer. Well, if the lady wants her kiss with quick hands, he suddenly dipped me, causing me to yelp. He looked deep into my eyes with a mischievous look on his face. The lady shall get her kiss. Roman began to lean in, but just as our lips were about to make contact, I heard someone clear their throat. Roman looked up and his eyes widened before he quickly put me back upright. I stumbled a bit as I got back into a steady position, and when I did, I gulped. Alpha Tristan stood in front of us with his blonde beta behind him and two men in black suits. Alpha Tristan. Roman gave a bow. I bowed as well, but no words came out. You're in the way, kid. Bridget spoke. My apologies. Roman spoke smoothly before taking my hand and stepping aside. It surprised me how cool and collected he was. Well, I guess this encounter didn't give him as much anxiety as it did me, for obvious reasons. And let's face it, Roman was just naturally composed in all situations. I wished right then that the ground would just open up and swallow me. I avoided Tristan's gaze as best as I could, but his eyes weren't even on me. Candidate Roman. Shouldn't you be lined up with the other candidates by now? It's almost 9. Tristan spoke in a cold and reprimanding tone. Yes, Alpha. Roman spoke. I was just. Punctuality is key in this program. Or weren't you told that? Tristan spoke sternly. Sorry, Alpha, it beta. Bridget, get the candidate inside and lined up. Tristan instructed. Bridget nodded at Tristan. Let's go. She told Roman. Roman looked at me. He was about to open his mouth when Bridget snapped. Now. I'll find you later. I told him. He wasn't exactly in the position to start arguing. He nodded at me. Okay. He gave one last look at Tristan before following Bridget. I still avoided Tristan's gaze, wondering who was supposed to move first. Leave us. Tristan spoke, dismissing the two men. They obeyed without question. I don't know why Tristan had even ordered them to leave. Us being alone together was sure to come off as suspicious. You don't have to be so rude to him. I told him in a small voice when I realized he wasn't going to say anything anytime soon. I don't need you to tell me how to talk to my candidates. He spoke. But maybe you need some pointers on how to talk to people. Do you want Roman to get suspicious? I asked. What I want doesn't matter. We established that already. He spoke. I suddenly felt like I had struck a nerve that I hadn't even been aiming for. I looked at the ground. Why did he have to do this to me? Wasn't it bad enough that my wolf already called out to his whenever we were within feet of each other? The magnetic pull was still intense, and it took all I had to fight it. To not look at him and want him all so badly. You should get inside as well. He spoke in a tone void of emotion. It's cold out here. With that, he walked past me. I hugged myself, suddenly feeling the effect of the weather. The weather wasn't the only thing that was a little chilly. Different thoughts had been haunting me, turning themselves into nightmares in my sleep. The wolf Tristan had mercilessly attacked, its face morphing into my mother's. The Van Cliff wolves chasing me through the woods, trying to hurt the other candidates, and there was nothing I could do. Strange wolves appearing at our doorstep demanding Uncle Victor go with them. Aunt Sarah screaming for him to stay. And it was all my fault. But one thought outweighed them all. I was taken back to the day of the ball, Roman and I by the steps. I just wanted to give you something that's special as well. Something you would take with you everywhere you go. The gift. My eyes shot open and I sat up in bed. Holy crap. The gift. I reached over to the bedside table that Kat and I shared and grabbed my phone. I took the cover off and searched it precariously for any weak spots. Just as I suspected. I gulped. I took off the stud earring that I wore. Kat had gotten then for me last Christmas. I used the pointy end to poke at the edges of the case until it finally came loose at a weak spot. I gulped. I put the earring down and slowly started to peel off the inner plastic part of the phone case. When I was done, I saw it. The small black sticker-like round device. I was taken back to that day. I'm actually not supposed to be showing you this, but they're surveillance patches. We're learning how to use them in AAP training. They're still in development, but I could put one of these on your backpack or on the walls of your room. And I'd be able to not only track your location but hear everything you say on an appropriate device. I gasped and dropped the case, surveillance device and all. I stood up and ran my hand through my hair in exasperation. He had been tracking me. Of course he had been. He was a freaking spy. I started hyperventilating. Spy, spy, spy. Everyone had been saying it, yet I had chosen not to believe them. Spies lie. Spies manipulate. Spies steal. Spies. I looked at the little device. Holy crap. He had probably been listening to me. He had been listening to everything I said. Everything I said about him, about Tristan. I felt my heart begin to thud in my chest. So he had probably known my secret all along. He had known that Tristan was my mate. The liar. How could he? Was that a bonus for him? Dating the Alpha's mate? Or pretending to? Was he planning on using me to get to Tristan? Was anything we had ever real? I was beyond furious. The feeling of betrayal ate at me and threatened to consume me. My privacy. He violated my privacy without a care about how I would feel. The jerk. I thought he loved me. I sure as hell loved him. I glared at the device and without thinking I marched up to it. I picked up the case and looked at the attached round patch. Roman, can you hear me? I spoke into it, shaking with fury. Ro, if you can hear this. My voice was breaking, but I didn't care. Freaking hate you. I screamed. I hate you and I hate your guts, and hot tears started falling down my face. I hate you. I spoke, putting as much spite into my words as I could. I threw the case into a drawer and threw myself on my bed. I wanted to continue crying, but I couldn't. I was too mad. I gripped my hands into fists. I could feel my wolf stirring within me, urging me to let the animal out. And I wanted to. I wanted so badly to shift and rummage the woods, running to just escape my human problems and not have to feel so much pain. My wolf form subdued most of my human needs and urges. I heard my phone beep on the floor. My heart skipped a beat as I looked to the side at it. I sucked in a deep breath before making my way over to where I had left it on the floor. I picked it up and looked at the message icon that had flashed up, showing that I had 2 messages. I grew even more nervous as I unlocked it. I sighed in relief when I saw 2 familiar names. Kat had texted me a few hours ago. Dude, did you serious get attacked by more rogues? So cool. Art, you're having all the fun. The second was from Chris a little later on. Hey, judging by the fact that you haven't been in school, I suppose you're doing some super cool AAP thing. So I guess I'll be attending the first ever official meeting of the Nature Club alone. Sigh. I placed my hand on my chest, partially relieved. For all I knew, this thing didn't even work anymore. Or maybe he had stopped listening after he had completed what he had come to do here. I sighed and walked over to my bed, taking a seat. I rubbed my temple in frustration. I still wasn't at ease. Well, of course I wasn't. I had just found out my estranged boyfriend had bugged me. What was I supposed to do now? Surely this is something Tristan would want to know. I mean, if he thought Roman was back, maybe this would help, right? But why did I immediately feel guilt at the very thought of handing it over? Why did it feel like I would be betraying him? He had betrayed me first. He was the traitor. I opened the drawer where I had thrown the case and took it out. I looked at the device tentatively. Roman, I asked in a shaky voice. Are you there? My phone let out a beep. I quickly picked it up and looked at a screen. There was an unknown number and a text message. Oh babe, I never left you. XXX 2 words. Therapy sucks. Kat yelled as she stormed into the room, slamming the door open. She threw her backpack on the floor. I mean, I like Dr. Vega, I really do. She seems like a nice lady and she always wears the coolest pantsuits, but all that talk about my unspoken feelings and my stored up anger and finding healthy outlets, and what's wrong with you? Kate stopped ranting when she saw me on the floor, sitting with my legs pulled up to my chest. I gulped when I looked up at her. Close the door, I whispered. She closed the door behind her and looked at me in confusion. You're not having some weird PTSD reaction to your attack, are you? She asked bluntly. I looked at her. Wasn't therapy supposed to be making her more empathetic? Because that's ridiculous. You do know there are like 6 ripped soldiers out there standing guard for you, right? She didn't even stop to listen to me before she continued speaking. You will not believe how everyone at school was talking about your little run-in with trouble. I think it should amazing publicity. When you go back to school on Monday, you will come off as a survivor. I can see it now. The Luna faces the enemy and wins. I don't even know how the story of the attack had made it to the people at school. As far as I was concerned, all the candidates had been sent home. But of course they had gotten the entire narrative wrong. The Luna wasn't brave and fearless. She had been afraid out of her mind and this close to peeing her pants. But funnily enough, almost getting killed by Van Cliff wolves was the least of my worries right now. I sucked in a deep breath. Kat. I called out her name, grabbing her attention. I held out my phone to her. What is it? Do you have pictures? Because if so, I definitely want to see them. She walked towards me excitedly and took the phone. Her brows rose when she read the message. She scoffed. Who the hell sent you this? Do you have a stalker or something? Because you know, one word to Alpha Tristan and whoever it is dead meat. It's from Roman. I told her in a low voice. Her eyes widened at me. What? I nodded at her. She looked back at the message. What? How do you know? I sucked in a deep breath before getting up and taking the phone case from the drawer. I showed it to her. She furrowed her brows in confusion as I pointed to the patch. I don't get it. She spoke. What? I quickly put my finger on my lips before throwing the cover back in the drawer and pushing her into the bathroom of our room. Did you see that round black thing? I asked in a whisper. I didn't know how good the microphone on that thing was, but I wasn't ready to take any chances. Kat nodded, still looking confused. It's called a surveillance patch. I whispered. It's something that Roman learnt to use in the AAP. It records audio and I think determines location. Kat gasped. He bugged you? I nodded, the fear now official settling in. Holy crap. Kat yelled. So the message and he sent you that. He's been spying on you this entire time. I nodded. Me and who knows who else. I sat down on the edge of the bathtub. It had been months. Just merely months, yet it had felt like Roman had happened a lifetime ago. He felt like a dream even. A very confusing and intense dream. But just hearing from him made everything come back. All the memories. All our conversations. It had never felt like I had been talking to a spy. It had just been Roman. Oh my freaking gosh. Kat pressed her hand on her forehead. This just took a spin in an unexpected direction. Wait, how do you know for sure that this is him? She whispered him. And at that moment I remembered Rick and the other soldiers outside. They couldn't hear us, right? I spoke to it. I explained to her. She looked unconvinced. You spoke to it. And spoke back. I gave Kat an unamused look. She was treating me like I was crazy. No, then I got the text message. Oh damn. I know. I told her. Do you think Roman is still in Woodfell? She asked. I don't know. I told her in frustration. Well, you have to tell Tristan. Kat told me. I just looked at her. I opened my mouth to say something, but I realized I didn't know what I wanted to say. We have to tell Tristan, Crystal. Kat told me sternly. I know. I spoke in exasperation. But, no buts. I stood up. Kat, I think there's more going on here than we might think. No, Chrissy, you just want an excuse to see him again or talk to him again. You want to give him a chance to try and justify his actions. You want to give him a chance to lie to you. So what if I do? I asked Kat. She didn't understand. She couldn't. She hadn't known Roman like I did. She didn't know what we had. I cared about him too. She told me softly as she put a hand on my shoulder. But he lied to us all. He was pretending the entire time. He can't be trusted. Her words stung. He had been pretending the whole time. including in our relationship. I think he wants to talk to me, I told her. She furrowed her brows at me. And why would you think that? I sucked in a deep breath. I heard him call out to me a few days ago. I was heading out of school after training and I heard his voice. Kat's eyes widened. And you're just telling me this now. You were mad at me, okay? And I thought that I was going crazy. I didn't think it was real until Tristan told me that he had caught Roman sent in the territory around the same time. Tristan, wait, is that what you two were talking about the day he came to talk to Mum and Dad? I bit my lower lip nervously and nodded. Kat rubbed her temple. You don't want your new lover to kill your ex-lover. When did your life become a telenovela? Kat, this is serious. I told her. I know. She responded in frustration. But we can't get ourselves involved in this. We're just kids. Tristan is the alpha. If he finds out about this some other way, I think Roman knew my mother. I blurted out. Kat stopped. She blinked rapidly at me. You better be kidding. I had been thinking about this so much that my head hurt, trying to find loopholes but there were none. Roman used to say things I would brush off, but honestly, they were things he shouldn't have known. Like what? Kat asked. Like he knew that my mother told me never to take off this necklace. Everyone knows that, Chrissy. Okay, maybe, but also, he once mentioned a very specific detail about the day my mother brought me to Woodfell. I rushed out the words, wanting desperately for Kat to believe me. Kat sighed. 𝐿𝐲, that doesn't prove anything. Roman spent a lot of time with Dad, he could have told him all this. I already asked Uncle Victor and he said he didn't tell Roman anything. So, Dad has a crappy memory sometimes. Kat spoke. Kat, I have a feeling that something is up. That might be so, but feelings aren't evidence. She told me. Tristan is trying to protect you. Withholding this information is an act of treason, might I remind you. Kat was right. I owed it to Tristan to tell him that Roman had contacted me. Maybe Uncle Victor was right, this might have just been a conspiracy that I was brewing up myself. I was just reacting to being abandoned by two very important people in my life. But something still didn't add up. But how do you explain the attacks? I asked. That couldn't be a coincidence. The first wolf didn't want to hurt me. What if it had gotten orders not to? Only two people would give that order, my mum and Roman. Okay. Kat gave in. Maybe that was Roman. But that's all the more reason you shouldn't want anything to do with him. That wolf was sent to kill Josh. Okay, that was bad. Whoever had sent that rogue had obviously been trying to hurt Tristan. And if it was Roman, Kat was right, I shouldn't want to be associated with any of that. But Roman was as much of a kid as we were. He was only 20. He came to Woodfell when he was 10, how could a 10-year-old be a spy? It just didn't add up and I wanted answers. But the second attackers were Van Cleef wolves. Ro didn't have ties to Van Cleef wolves, my mum did. Kat looked shocked. It was Van Cleef wolves that attacked you today. Yes. And I know for sure they came for me this time. What if my mum is in trouble? I asked Kat. Kat put her hand on her stomach. It's then that I had noticed how pale she had gotten. Where's my dad? She asked. What's wrong? I asked her. We need to tell him. If Van Cleef wolves are here and after you, then he needs to know. He already does. I met him when I got back. He told me about his history with the Eclipse Pack and how he got out. Then you should know this isn't a game, Crystal. Kat spoke desperately and seriously. Van Cleefs were bad news. If they have your mom or if they're trying to get to you. Crap, that would be bad. I know. I told her. Maybe your dad will have answers when he gets back from questioning. My dad is getting questioned. Kat screeched. I bit my lip. Was I not supposed to tell her that? I assumed that Aunt Sarah had already disclosed this information to her when she had picked her up. Didn't your mum tell you all this when she picked you up? I asked Kat. Uncle Victor and Aunt Sarah were very open with their kids about things that affected them. So the fact that Aunt Sarah hadn't told Kat any of this was strange. Mum didn't pick me up. I mean, she wanted to, but I wanted to leave school and therapy early, so I told her that I would walk. That definitely sounded like Kat. What the hell? They think he has something to do with those psychopaths. I figured that this wasn't the best time to tell Kat, relax. I told her. He's the only Van Cleef around, that's probably why. Better. Kate spoke. Like usual, she was trying to appear tough, but I could tell she was scared. Nothing will happen to him, Kat, he's innocent. You were 2 and they still treated you like a criminal. As someone who had gone through a trial in Woodfell, I knew the Silvercrest pack believed in the statement guilty until proven innocent. If I can help it, I won't let anything happen to him. Promised Kat. I might have been totally against my role as Luna, but I wasn't going to let anyone accuse Uncle Victor. Kat clenched her fists. Do you really think Roman might be involved with Van Cleef's? She asked. I don't know. I admitted. But I just have a feeling that this isn't a coincidence. Kat took in a deep breath. Well, there's only one way to find out. I furrowed my brows at her. She marched out the room without another word. I followed, curious and scared about what she was about to do. She picked my phone up from my bed where she had left it. Kat, what are you doing? I asked. Calling Roman. She shrugged, and next thing I knew, she was putting the phone to her ear. Are you crazy? I yelped as I rushed to grab the phone from her, but she still held on to it tightly. You're the one who was talking about treason. Contacting a spy seems a lot like treason. Kat finally let go of the cell phone. Fine. She relented. I quickly cut the call, but a part of me couldn't help but wonder if he would have answered. Okay, so our next step is telling Tristan. I told Kat. She huffed. As all good upstanding pack members should. I understood her annoyance. I desperately wanted answers as well. But we needed to do this the right way. Great. All this has made me hungry. Kat spoke. I didn't see how that was even possible, but getting out of the room and doing something to keep us occupied with how anxious we both were was a good idea. We could make spring rolls. I suggested. Hazel loved them, and I knew she would definitely be happy if she came home to them. Okay, you can make the shells and the filling. Kat spoke. I rolled my eyes. That's like 75 of the work. Crystal, look at it from a glass half full perspective. She tried to persuade me. My glass is literally only a quarter way full. I told her. She sighed. Crystal, we're already frustrated enough. Do you really want to bring math into this? I'm just saying. I was cut off when I heard my phone ping and the message icon popped up with the unknown number. Kat and I shared a frightened look. Should we? She started, but I had already opened the message. Kat leaned in to read into with me. Crystal, I'm in trouble. I need your help. I looked up at Kat and I was about to say something when the front door burst open. Kat and I both jumped, causing me to drop the phone. We turned to see Aunt Sarah walk into the room. She walked straight to me and placed her hands on my shoulders. Kat took that as an opportunity to pick up my phone and place it in her pocket. Are you okay, sweetie? I nodded quickly. Yes, why wouldn't I be? Aunt Sarah looked at me in confusion. Maybe because you got attacked a second time by Van Cleef's. Kat spoke in a duh tone. Oh right, I spoke. Kat placed a finger in the middle of her lips. Did she wants me to stay quiet about the messages? Oh baby. Aunt Sarah pulled me into a hug. I don't know why these things always seem to happen to you. She spoke, pulling back to look at me sympathetically. Well, I've made it this far, haven't I? I joked. She gave me a small smile. Just remember, baby, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. I smiled and nodded. Aunt Sarah's motivational verses never failed to calm me down, even if it was just a little bit. She suddenly grew serious. Beta Bridget is here for you. Why? I asked too quickly. What if she knew about Roman's messages? I don't know how she would, but damn it, I was nervous. Let's just go downstairs so that you can talk to her and your uncle. Kat and I shared a confused look. Okay. I spoke, feeling uncertain. Aunt Sarah put her hand on my back and began to lead me out. She then stopped. Oh, and Catherine, I know you left school early. I saw Kat flinch. We'll talk later. She told her before she continued leading me. When we got downstairs, I was surprised to see Rick standing by the dining room. Hazel stood in a corner just staring at him with a goofy smile on her face. Uncle Victor and Bridget sat in the living area. Parker stood in front of Bridget, who just stared at him in confusion. It looked like he was holding out a crayon to her. Bridget took it slowly. Thank you. Bridget responded as she took it. He beamed at her. This means we're married. Bridget's eyes widened. Oh gosh. Aunt Sarah spoke as she rushed to take Parker. Bring cookies the next time you visit, wifey. Parker yelled as he waved. Kat came up behind me. Oh my gosh, freaking Beta Bridget Lane is in our house. I had forgotten what a fan Kat was of Bridget. I wanted to point out that Bridget had been in here before, but I just decided to let her have this. Here. Aunt Sarah spoke as she gave Parker to Kat. Take your brother and your drooling sister out of here. Kat and I turned to look at Hazel, who I now realized was figuratively drooling at Rick. Rick actually kind of looked uncomfortable and kept shifting. Why am I stuck with babysitting? Kat asked as she took Parker. I want to attend the grown-ups meeting. Aunt Sarah rose her brows at her. Oh, you're grown now. In ancient times, I would have been married expecting my second child. She spoke matter-of-factly. Aunt Sarah gave her a what will I do with you look. Don't worry about the meeting, you'll find out soon enough. Crystal tells you everything anyway. That was true. 𝐾𝐥𝐳. Fine. Let's go color a picture of a strong, independent woman, Park. She told him. Like my wife.
Parker 𝐶𝐵d.
Hazel. Kat hissed at her little sister. Hazel quickly snapped her head to look at her older sister, who waved her over. She looked disappointed as she followed her. I followed Aunt Sarah into the living area. Bridget rose and nodded at me. Luna. She gave a pointed look at Uncle Victor, and I really hoped she wasn't expecting him to rise for me as hell. The Luna rules didn't apply in this household. Hey Bridget. I greeted. I hadn't forgotten about our conversation earlier, but there were more important things to have anxiety over right now. I looked at Uncle Victor. How did the questioning go? He stood up. It was good. I can't say I was much help though. Did you see them, the wolves, I mean? What I really wanted to know is if they had found out why they were here. I did see them. And no, I don't know them. He answered. He put his hands together and looked at Bridget. I immediately knew that something was up. Bridget stepped forward. Luna, your uncle and I have been talking, and we think it would be best for your safety and the safety of your family if you moved into the Alpha's manor. My eyes widened. I looked at Aunt Sarah and she simply nodded. What? I yelped. Just until Tristan figures all this out. Uncle Victor added quickly. I didn't know how to feel. They wanted me to leave the house. The only place I had ever felt safe. Wait, does this mean the attacks won't stop? Is it true? Are they after me? Uncle Victor didn't meet my eyes, but Bridget did. On the contrary, Luna, this is just the beginning. 𝐶𝐬𝐬. I don't need to hear you say it back, Crystal. I honestly don't. But I love you. And I know I don't deserve your love because you were right. I'm broken. Ha. I just wanted to give you something that's special as well. Something you would take with you everywhere you go. Almost like you have a piece of me with you. Do you like it? Oh, why yes, Ro, I simply adore being spied on. The Silvercrest pack is all I've ever really known as home. Then why did you betray them? Crystal. I'm still here. No, you're not, Ro. We can have anything we want, Crystal. I can give us anything we want. Even Woodfell. I never wanted Woodfell, Roman, I wanted you. My lady is right here, where else would I rather be? Liar. I remember the day Roman left like it was yesterday. It was so ordinary and boring. It's still a wonder how I remembered it so vividly. It was a Thursday. Because bad things only happen on Thursdays. Roman had been wearing a striped navy blue and black golf shirt that Aunt Sarah had gotten him. Kat called him Boy Scout whenever he would wear it because for some reason, it made him look admittedly much younger. He had AAP work to do. I had thought after he had finished up with their training it would be better. No need to go into school 3 hours early or to leave 3 hours later. But the internship portion was just as hectic. Roman had graduated, but he wasn't planning on going to college until I graduated. Which I had told him a million times was stupid. Uncle Victor and Aunt Sarah and Kat and Chris and the whole freaking AP had told him it was stupid, but the boy had made up his mind and there was no changing it. I thought it had been sweet in a romance novel way, but not in reality. I worked really hard, but there was no guarantee that I would even get into the same amazing colleges Roman got into with his AAP backing. And even though I did love him, we were too young to stake our lives on each other like that. But he would always get so mad when I talked to him about it, so gradually I stopped pushing. Roman had long since moved out of Sal and Millie's house and gotten his own little apartment, which I hardly visited because Roman was almost 20 and I was still 17, and Aunt Sarah and Uncle Victor were way more conscious of the age difference then. Even if it was barely 2 years. They trusted us. But they didn't trust our hormones. Uncle Victor's word, so it was a Thursday and school was out. It was summer vacation and Roman came over like he usually did. He brought Aunt Sarah her favorite cinnamon buns from Chris' mother's bakery, and a brownie for Parker. A vanilla glazed donut for Hazel, but he didn't get to give it to her because for some reason lately, Hazel had been really shy around Roman and would always hide out in her room when he popped up. I got a box of different types of mini cupcakes because lately I could never decide on which ones I liked best. I never ever got to eat all of them because my family were little sweet-toothed thieves. But anyway, Roman had come over that day and I remember hugging him and teasing him about using his AAP money to bribe my family into liking him with baked goods. He had laughed and said, "They already love me," which was true. He only had an hour with me before he had to go back to work and Parker would not leave us be, so we ended up in the living room, watching The Adventures of Gumball. A strange show for a weird kid. It explained a lot. Roman had announced that he had to go and I remember dramatically throwing my arms around him, hugging him tightly and telling him not to go as I usually did. He had chuckled and kissed my forehead. Parker had let out a huge yuck. So I kissed his forehead as well. He had stood up, briefly infuriating Parker because he was blocking the TV. He then squeezed my hand and said, "See you later." I had nodded and called out a careless, "Love ya." I covered Parker's ears hot stuff. He winked and chuckled before leaving. I hadn't thought to walk him to the door or to kiss him one last time. He said, "See you later." I didn't see him later, not after a day, not after weeks, not after 3 months. You should have just stayed, Roman. You should have just stayed. I've made up my mind. I told Kat. We had spent most of the night taking out my braids while Kat talked about how I couldn't move into the Alpha's manor with 2-month-old braids. She had a point, but the thought of having to actually deal with my hair irked me. But we didn't really talk much about that. We talked about the text messages. Argued about it actually as I packed my stuff. Kat thought we should text Roman back just to hear what kind of help he needed. I didn't want to. I just couldn't bear the thought of talking to him again. I was worried, don't get me wrong. So worried it made me sick. I thought of what trouble he could be in. What if he actually really did need my help and I was here being mad at him? Finding out he had been spying on me had unnerved me. You don't spy on the people you love, Roman 𝐸. Kat said we wouldn't actually help him, we just needed to know what he wanted. Maybe it would help with the investigation. Of course I wanted to know, I wanted all this to be a mistake. I wanted him to say that he had been kidnapped or brainwashed or something. But I had sat through the endless trials, I had seen the evidence against him. Roman had betrayed everyone, he was a spy and Kat was right. I shouldn't give him a chance to lie to me again. I'm telling Tristan. I told Kat the next morning. She was going through my bag, trying to see if I had packed any of her clothes probably. She rose her brows at me. Are you sure? I looked at my phone which I had turned off last night. I nodded. You were right. He needs to know. And I should have told him the minute it happened. Kat nodded. I support you. I know this can't be easy for you. It wasn't. Truth be told, I had made up my mind last night. I had also mentally apologized to Roman a million times. I'm sorry, Ro, but I just can't trust you anymore. I had been wanting to hear from him for months, to get an explanation, but honestly, I wish he could have just stayed gone. Nothing would ever wash away the betrayal. Part of me wondered if this could be a joke or a test. Maybe someone was testing my loyalty to the pack, or to Tristan by sending the message. Either way, I had made up my mind. But I just can't tell your parents. At least not just yet. Kat looked at me in confusion. They'll want to know. I know. I sighed. But I just don't want to put them through all this again. Especially with the Van Cliff mess. That's not your fault. She told me. Uncle Victor's mind had been somewhere else entirely since he had gotten back last night. Everyone had noticed, even Parker. But it is. The wolves were after me. Bridget hadn't said it in so many words, but I knew being here was putting everyone at risk. Uncle Victor was stressed and it was because of me. I didn't want to add to that. I won't say anything. Kate agreed. But you better visit often or I'll be forced to take up the role of the good child. She spoke with a disgusted look on her face. I smiled at my cousin. That was Kat for. I'll miss you. I walked towards her and wrapped my arms around her in a hug. I'll be back before you know it. And we'll still see each other all the time. I know that, dork. Stop being such a cheeseball. She spoke but only hugged me tighter. Crystal. I heard Aunt Sarah's voice. I pulled away from Kat. Time to go. I grabbed my suitcase and Kat took my duffel and we headed out the room. Hazel ran up to me and hugged me. She frowned when she looked up at me. I can't believe you're leaving. I patted her head affectionately. It's only for a little while, Hayes. She looked up at me. Promise. I realized that I couldn't actually do that. There was no way of knowing how long all this would take, but I hoped for the best. Hazel would go through the complete changing any day now, and I wanted to be there to celebrate with her. Aunt Sarah had baked me a cake and put up balloons on my changing day. Then she had taken me for a run in the woods. It had been exhilarating. It was the first time I actually enjoyed being a werewolf. I had loved sharing the experience with Aunt Sarah, but I had wondered how amazing it would have been with my mother. I'll visit all the time, I promised instead. I held out my hand to her. Walk me out. Hold on. Not so fast. Kat stepped forward. Why are you wearing Mum's lipstick? Hazel looked away quickly. How hadn't I noticed her red lips earlier? Kat and I shared a look before grinning at each other and singing Rick. Hazel hit her face. Stop it. Kat threw her arm over Hazel's shoulder. Don't worry, baby sis, crushes are perfectly normal. But I wouldn't go the older guy route like your cousin here. I glared at Kat and she just raised her hands as Hazel giggled. Crystal. Aunt Sarah called again. I headed down the stairs with the closest people to sisters that I had. Before we even took the last step, I sensed Tristan's presence and I found myself growing more excited. He was in the kitchen, engaged in what looked like a very serious discussion with Aunt Sarah and Uncle Victor. I noticed Parker was on the countertop, next to where Bridget stood, shoving a drawing in her face and explaining something. I wanted to laugh at how helpless Bridget looked. The big bad beta didn't know how to handle kids. Rick was there too and Hazel suddenly moved behind Kat. The minute we walked into the kitchen, the conversation halted. Tristan looked at me, and it felt like I had been holding my breath, but now that I saw him I could breathe again. I don't know if that had been my feelings or his through the empathy link. He walked towards me and stopped right in front of me. Hey, he greeted. Hey, I responded. Ladies and gents, have there ever been more awkward mates? He looked at Kat and Hazel and then nodded. Hello. Kat, hey. Hazel, eep. Tristan being my mate was something that I had normalized so much that I sometimes forgot that it was still a wonder to my family that the alpha was my mate. Tristan looked confused, but it quickly turned to concern when he turned back to me. How are you today? He asked. Good. I responded. I tried to call you last night. Oh. I had stuffed my phone, which was still off, and the case in my bag. It was evidence now. I wanted to tell Tristan exactly why my phone had been off, but not in front of Uncle Victor and Aunt Sarah. The battery died. I explained. Wow, Crystal. Just wow. Surely an A student with a couple of BS here, and there can come up with something better. Tristan looked confused, so I quickly changed the topic. How are you? Great. He responded. But he didn't look great. He looked tired. His eyes drifted to my suitcase, which I had set down. I'm sorry it has to be this way. I was going to come over last night to tell you the news myself, but I was busy. He explained. It's okay. I told him. But it wasn't. Really wasn't. His brother had almost died. Van Cliff wolves had infiltrated Silvercrest territory. And now my traitor ex-boyfriend was asking me for help. I couldn't help but think about how much easier Tristan's life would be without me in it. If he hadn't met me, if I hadn't come to Woodfell, none of this would have happened. What's going on? Did you find out why the Van Cliff wolves are after me? No. Tristan spoke. I felt deflated. Great. Another mystery. Alpha. Bridget spoke up. She was holding up a phone. Tristan sighed. Can't it wait? You want to tell her that? Tristan looked back at me. He really did look all so tired. Take it. I urged him. He nodded. You should say goodbye to your family. Tristan told me as he stepped away and headed, taking the phone from Bridget. I looked at Aunt Sarah and Uncle Victor. Aunt Sarah looked teary. Please don't cry. I mentally begged. If she cried, I would too. I walked towards them. I'll see you guys soon. I spoke as I hugged both of them. Take care of yourself, sweetie. Aunt Sarah whispered. Promise. I replied as I pulled away. Uncle Victor gave me a sad smile. We'll figure this all out, kiddo. I sucked in a deep breath and nodded. I'm going to miss you, Crystal. Parker exclaimed as he rushed towards me and wrapped his little arms around my legs. I patted him on the head. I'll miss you too, buddy. He didn't let our sweet goodbye last long before running back to Bridget and yelling, I'll miss you the most. You think you're special to someone. Tristan walked back and looking even more stressed than before. He walked towards us. We should get going, that was my grandmother. He frowned slightly and looked at me. She wants help with the ball prep. Are you up for it? The AP ball. I can't believe I had forgotten about that. I turned to look at Kat. I know for a fact that Kat had procured the perfect AAP gown for the ball this year because she had been certain she would get picked. I immediately felt guilty at the fact that I would be on that lineup instead of her. You're all going to be there, right? I asked. Aunt Sarah smiled. We wouldn't miss it. I guess I'm up for it. I told Tristan. He frowned. You don't have to if you don't want to. After what happened yesterday, I want to. I spoke. I didn't want to. But I needed something to take my mind off everything. I didn't know what kind of help Nana Francesca could possibly need from me, but I figured I owed her after missing the shopping trip we were supposed to have yesterday. Okay. Tristan nodded at my aunt and uncle. I'll take care of Crystal. And for you safety, Rick will stay for another week. Rick nodded firmly and I turned around and saw Hazel's face light up. Kat shook her head at her. We'll be going now. Tristan spoke. I looked at my aunt and uncle, then Parker, who was still hugging Bridget's legs as she looked uncomfortable. Then I looked at Hazel and Kat. This will be sorted out and I'll be back soon. Or at least I hope so.